coverage of the U.S. elections is still on, and I'm Joe Hansen, and I'm joined as well by Judith Atibi. As the results start rolling in, we'll keep you updated on the latest development.
Oh, yes, indeed, that's right, Joe. Now, polls have closed in several states, and vote counting is underway. We expect the first wave of results to come in from the East Coast, where voting ended a few hours ago. Now, we can confirm a number of states which will be reeling out in due course.
That's right. Well, let's take a look at the key battleground states, especially Florida, Pennsylvania, and of course Ohio, are expected to be crucial in determining the outcome of this elections. Judith.
And we're already seeing some early trends in Florida. For example, the Republican candidate is leading in the rural areas, while the Democratic candidate is performing well in the urban centers.
That's right. We'll continue to bring you live updates, expert analysis, and breaking news as it happens. Now, stay tuned for real-time results and also insightful commentary as well.
In the meantime, you can always check out our website and as well as our social media channels for interactive maps, polling data, and in-depth coverage of the elections as well. Election results are flowing in. Former President Donald Trump has won Florida, Texas, and other traditionally Republican-leaning states, while Vice President Kamala Harris has secured victory in Maryland, Vermont, and other traditionally Democratic states. Now, several battleground states are too close to call, as Trump has won Iowa and Harris has taken Illinois. Now, we're going to get into more analysis here. We have two guests joining us to give us some in-depth analysis on pretty much the results of the elections as well, and also what we preempt to see come the elections. We're going to get started with our very first guest who's joining us, and that's Professor Iche Sikanku. He's University of Media, Arts and Communication, UNIMAC, and he joins us from Accra, Ghana. Well, I mean, Professor, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. I can see from your back there, you're all ready and prepared to go regarding the elections. So I'm just going to get started and ask you what you see with the trends so far. Early wins for both Kamala with traditional states, Democratic state. We've also seen early wins with Trump as well for very traditional Republican states. But I have to ask, what do you think has been different between the last election cycle and this election cycle? What is surprisingly different with this election results this time around?
Yeah, thank you very much. When you look at the election results, not very much has changed. I'm sure we all know by now that a lot of the attention is going to be on the key battleground states. However, it also depends on how Kamala Harris performs there compared to how Joe Biden performed last year. In the last electoral cycle. When you take Pennsylvania, for instance, one of the places that we have to start looking at is the major cities like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. That is where normally the Democrats have their strength. There's a huge African-American population in Philadelphia. In 2016, the numbers didn't come up largely or hugely in Philadelphia, and that is how come Hillary Clinton lost that state. Also in the swing regions, there are swing counties in those swing regions as well. When you go out to the suburbs, that's where Donald Trump has his strength. And so in a state like Pennsylvania, it may come down to counties like Scranton, Erie County, and Northampton. These are the three counties that we should be looking at as the results trickle in. I know there are many people who are looking at the results and there might be some trepidation because perhaps Donald Trump is ahead at this point. But it really does not mean much because, as you said, these are reliably strong states for both candidates. So what we can do is to begin looking at where the results are tilting in the various swing states. If you go to Georgia, for instance, you want to start looking at Atlanta, where the Democrats normally would have a majority of their votes coming in. If Kamala Harris is underperforming in such a state, especially among the African-American population, that is going to sound a very, very dangerous night for her. You go to North Carolina, In North Carolina, presently, Donald Trump is ahead over there. He has flipped certain states that Biden won. But at the same time, you are yet to hear from big cities like Charlottesville, where there are a lot of young people over there. North Carolina, too, has seen many people immigrating over there. And so it's changing the complexity of that particular state. And then you come to Arizona. It's still too early to say anything in Arizona. And then you go to Nevada, where not much is coming in. So this is what it's beginning to look like in the swing states. But in terms of the general tenor of the race, if you ask me how different it is, for the first time, abortion and female reproductive rights have become a major issue in a way that it has not been in a U.S. election. The second one would be the economy. And if you look at some of the exit polls, they are also speaking to a leader who understands their plight, a leader who is able to change their conditions. And so these are some of the factors that would begin to affect the election. This is going to be a big women's vote election, and the number of women who will turn out would be a very big deciding factor.
We saw a huge role and impact, or should I say influence, of social media around this time, this election cycle, compared to that of 2020 and 2016. And because of that, we saw early turnout, especially for the younger crowd, and especially seeing the cues from today. So far, you heard from our correspondent saying that Nevada will still keep the polling units opened for as long as possible, since the queues are as long as they're 1 hour long. And so I have to ask you, do you think that the younger generation will have any type of impact with the turnout of results for this election?
Oh, yes, definitely. In the U.S. And probably in many democracies across the world, one of the major concerns has been the lack of attention and the lack of enthusiasm by young people in elections generally. Young people, as you rightly said, are probably more attuned to being on social media. They have other concerns sometimes, if not in school, probably consumed by the celebrity culture. They are not usually high-end people in terms of being plugged in as far as politics is concerned. And so whichever party is able to grasp their attention will definitely get a vote there. I mean, the enigma or the irony of it is that they do account for a huge percentage of the population in many countries, not just the United States. And so I believe that young people will definitely be a deciding factor in this election. If you remember in 2008, one of the major reasons why Barack Obama won was because he was able to win massively among the younger population. Because these are not your usual traditional voters, your ability to mobilize them and get them to the polls gives you a different alternative to driving up the numbers. And so churning in the politically, politically non-tuned, turning in people who are not typically politically, invested people or enthusiastic people, getting them out there, churning out those numbers to go to the polls to vote is absolutely going to make a difference for either candidate. But I was in the U.S. myself in March and in August, September this year, covering the primaries as well as part of the general elections. And one of the things that I was hearing from a lot of these young people was their apathy towards the election. I was actually in Iowa delivering guest lectures at Drake University, Iowa State University, and the University of Iowa. Prior to that, I was in the state of Maryland. I also was at the University of Maryland. I used the opportunity to talk to quite a number of young people. What I was hearing was that they were very apathetic towards the political system. They had become very, very disgusted and very, very disinterested in the politics of their nation, because they continuously said that they were not happy with the two choices that had been presented to them. They said that the politics had been taken up by a lot of the older generation, and that they did not represent them in a way that was appealing to them. However, we've seen that Joe Biden is no more the candidate. That changed over time, and Kamala Harris became the candidate. So maybe that will change. Maybe that will inspire a lot more young people. as we have seen, many more women are voting. Young females form part of this sizable population. They are concerned about reproductive rights. And so maybe the young female population may make a difference or could make a difference in this particular election.
All right.
And looking at the swing states now, you see that the 10 swing states that we have is Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Florida, Ohio, and Texas. And out of the 10 states, about 6 of them have been announced as Trump's stronghold, from Georgia to Arizona, Florida, Ohio, and Texas. So far, so good. And as well as North Carolina, he is won the state and is leading. And so let me ask you, Professor, and ask, with all of these 10 states that we've now seen the majority leaning to Trump, is there a chance for Harris with the swing states?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just a bit of correction, and I'm sure you can go back and check, but I do have this on record, though. Florida and Ohio and Texas are no longer swing states. In fact, they're not swing states. Texas is not a swing state. It's a reliably red state. That's the home of George Bush, a very conservative state. That's Texas, I mean. Florida used to be a swing state back in the day, but it's tilted red over time. The same goes for Ohio. Used to be swing, but it's no more swing. They've voted reliably red over time. But I do still think that we have to wait it out, because elections haven't come in for states like California. That's the state with the biggest electoral college vote, about 54, I believe.
Yes.
We haven't heard from Washington State. We have not heard from Oregon, for instance. We have not heard from New Hampshire, for instance. And these are not even swing states. These are blue states. So I still do think that it's still early days, and we are yet to even hear from the swing states, not the 10 but 7, because what we have so far is just projections. So it's just not a huge percentage of the states reporting. If you look at them, some are at 35, some are at 41, 42. Pennsylvania currently, I think it's about 51% of the precincts reporting right now. If you look at Georgia, they have it at, I think, about 66% of them reporting right now. Trump is ahead over there. You also have to look at where the votes are coming in from. If they're coming from a lot of the suburbs and the rural areas, then yes, Donald Trump is going to be leading. But if we are yet to hear from the big cities, which normally take a long time to count. Okay, look at Michigan. Michigan is at only 27% reporting. You know, so we cannot really say much with those figures. The big cities take a long time to collate their votes. They take a long time to report. We cannot say much as far as that is concerned. Also, don't forget that in a state like Georgia, they have over 333,000 mail-in ballots coming. There's also a huge percentage of absentee ballots coming in, and early votes that are coming, which have not been counted. When you look at Virginia, they have about 75% of the state reporting. Kamala Harris is up at 49.9%, and Trump is at 48.3%. When I checked Virginia the last time, it was Trump who was winning. Now Virginia has come, a lot more states, a lot more counties are reporting, and Kamala is leading. So they even reported New Mexico, which is reliably blue. So I'll be reading this with a lot of caution, especially because if you look at the last elections, if you take Arizona, for instance, Joe Biden won Arizona by less than 1 percentage point. It was 0.04. That was the margin, razor-thin margin. If you look at the other swing states, even in Pennsylvania, Hillary during 2016, 2020, very, very razor-thin. Look at Georgia. Georgia was 0.04. You look at Michigan in 2016, it was 0.03 or 0.02. Less than a percentage point. That is how close it is, separated by very, very, very close margins. So I do still think it's early days yet to read any meaning into it. But if you would give me a second to talk about violence, I don't know. But to the extent that Donald Trump is a candidate in this particular election, his rhetoric, right, has been characterized by a lot of extremist language, a lot of violent rhetoric, a lot of fear-mongering going on there, a lot of labeling, a lot of misogyny going on over there by Donald Trump. And that has characterized a lot of his rhetoric and his political communication. Some scholars have even found that there has been an uptick in hate crimes in the U.S. Anytime that Donald Trump's rhetoric went up or was violent. And so yes, this has been a very, very different election, because of the extent to which candidates like Donald Trump have gone to inject a lot of extremist language and rhetoric in the presidential campaign. We don't know the effects that it will have, whether people have bought into it. We can only wait till the election night goes much, much deeper or morning into the morning and maybe a couple of days to see whether this really, how far this worked in this election.
What is going to swing this election? You have looked at the stats, you've looked at the numbers, you have traveled, and you've done extensive work when it comes to polls, right? So I have to ask you, when anyone with untrained eyes looking at these elections and looking at the polls, they will say Trump is leading. But what would you say would swing it? What is the chance of it being swung?
Well, first of all, let me just say that words do matter. I'm a rhetorician, I'm a political communication person, and in the way that words inspire, words can also hurt, words can divide. And the statistics, the research has shown that it does shape public opinion, it does shape people's values, it shapes people's actions. And if you do a content analysis of the rhetoric that has been used in this particular campaign, there has been an uptick of violent rhetoric. So I was just using that to support whatever point he was making. But so let me quickly just say that words do matter in elections. Beyond that, to your question about polls, we have to understand that polls are just a snapshot of an election. They are not a surefire predictor of an outcome of an election. And so that snapshot can change from time to time. And that's why in 2016, there was a problem that most people who did the polls had with their polling results as compared to what eventually happened. And so it's not a surefire indicator of whatever will happen on that day. So the polls are one thing, but what happens in reality is a totally different thing. It may give us an indication of what people think at a particular point in time, but we might not be able to account for it forever at every single point in time. If you look at the results that are even coming in, I wouldn't even put any sure bets on those results, right? Because it does change depending on the percentages in terms of the volume of results that are coming, and also in terms of where these results are coming from, especially in those swing states that are really, really, really close and are toss-ups. We have to really wait until we have a sizable proportion of these results coming in before making any permutations. And so that is the extent to which we can talk about the polls. There's also the margin of error. Most of the polls that have come in are well within the margin of error. And if it's within the margin of error, we cannot do a lot with it because then it means it's just way too close to call. And if you look at the swing state polls that are coming, that is really where they lie, within that margin of error.
All right, Professor Etsi Sikanku, University of Media Arts and Communication.